Charlie Kirk was an incredibly polarizing figure. Many people loved him, many people hated him. He was a double Libra, and Libra is known as the platform balance archetype. So in the spirit of balance, I will attempt to give positive interpretations of the planets in the signs, as well as negative interpretations, because every front has a back. And depending on how you perceive reality and perceived Charlie Kirk, you're likely to either resonate more deeply with the positive interpretation or the negative one. And that's the beautiful thing about astrology, is I can describe his soul's intention for him in this lifetime. And the soul has an intention to learn, has a certain lesson plan, if you will. And for him to get an A+ on the report card, so to speak, he wants to leverage the most positive, virtuous expression of all these symbols in his chart. But that's not guaranteed. The soul, once it enters this side of the veil and forgets where it came from, can of course fall victim to the ego. And then if these symbols are expressed in a more ego, pride, fear, or anger-based spectrum of potentials, then it creates a lot of tripping hazards and then slows one's evolution in a given incarnation. My intention is to paint that picture. The stark juxtaposition between the light and dark expressions of his chart, so that you, with your own conscious awareness, can kind of try to pinpoint on how he was doing on that scale. If you find this sample reading interesting and you'd like to get one yourself, I'm currently holding a very rare sale through my website. You can see the link on the screen. I'll also post them below in the comment section and the show description. With all that being said, let's go ahead and dive into his chart. Quick disclaimer here, Charlie Kirk's birth time is unknown, which limits what we can know about his chart. For example, there's no way to know what houses his planets are located, nor his rising sign, which is unfortunate. But I've parsed out 3 major themes from his chart that we know he was working with in this last incarnation. Firstly, he was a Libra on steroids. He had both of his luminaries, his sun and moon, both in the same sign and very near to each other. If he was born in the late hours of the evening, it was actually a very strong sun-moon conjunction, right there at the end of the waning crescent phase. If he was born in the wee hours of the morning, his moon still would have been in Libra in the early degrees of Libra. So he is a double Libra, and he was also born with Jupiter conjunct the sun. And I'll have a lot to say about Jupiter, but whatever Jupiter touches in your chart, it expands that. So it also is expanding the sign energy of Libra. So he was a Libra down to his toes. The classic symbol for Libra is that of the platform balance that we'd find on the streets of Babylon or something like this, where we have an ounce of lead on one tray, and then we pour out some gold dust on the other tray until they find a balance. Very different substances. And this is, as always with these symbols, we can take them in a lot of different directions. But for starters, we're finding the concept of opposites coming into a state of equilibrium with one another. For starters, we find the balance between opposing ideas. Every story has 2 sides, let's say. We've all heard that one before. So when we talk about somebody's moon, it's about instinct. So there was an instinct in him, a drive, a motivation that was felt emotionally for him to find balance in his life, in every area of his life, and to find fairness. Now, what feels fair to one person may not feel fair to another, so perception of reality is the elephant in the room here. But double Librans have a natural understanding that 2 well-intended people can perceive the same thing in very different ways. So we find balance between opposing ideas. It's linked to the archetype of the judge, the diplomat, and the peacekeeper. Libra is an air sign. All air signs are on the mental plane. Double Libras tend to be very intelligent, connected to the idea of finding balance between opposing ideas. They tend to be excellent debaters. And he was a force to be reckoned with, to be sure. And people who are double Libras are born with an innate gift, a superpower, if you will. And that is an ability to connect and maintain the bridge of rapport with other people, relationship building skills. And also Libras tend to be very kind, although Relationship building skills and kindness will exist in direct tension with another primary theme, which we'll talk about, which is all this very strong scorpionic energy in his chart. And this is the central pillars of his chart, which can find a happy compromise, but there's very much tension between Libra and Scorpio naturally. Okay, so people skills, that's part of Libra. And of course, that can lead to people pleasing sometimes, but it can also be leveraged, and this is a shadow side potentially of Libra, of manipulation. Double Libras make very good salespeople. And if used from pride, ego, and manipulation, I invoke the meta archetype here of the unscrupulous car salesman who knows what car that person wants and manipulates that person to get them to buy that car. Yes, it's a good salesperson, but they're not doing it in a positive, higher octave expression way. So the question becomes, did his double Libran harmony weave unbreakable alliances through genuine relational grace, or twist them into slick manipulations that charm the crowd while hiding the agenda? You decide. Moving on to Jupiter, Charlie Kirk clearly was Mr. Jupiter. The sun in your chart represents your own identity and self-image. Yes, he was a Libra, but he was a Jupiterian one. And Jupiter is known as the king of the gods. And what the sun and Jupiter have in common is they're the biggest bodies in the solar system. All the planets orbit the sun. I think Jupiter has something like 80 moons that orbit it. So there are fundamental qualities associated with the sun and Jupiter, which is luminosity, warmth, and gravity. So he had a quality of gravitas about him, like him or hate him, and therefore, through that gravitas, he naturally sucked people into his orbit. So clearly, he was Mr. Jupiter, the king of the gods. He was a king in this world. The question is, was he a good king or an evil king? Somebody else has Jupiter conjunct the sun, and that is Joe Rogan. And he is the king of podcasters. And what I mean by that is he has the biggest podcast in the world, last I checked. And kings of the world tend to magnetize success into their life. Now, is it smart success or stupid success? It depends on the choices we make. But Jupiter people tend to create abundance within their lives and within themselves. And the evolutionary intention of that is to create an abundance in oneself so that you can then share that abundance with others through the innate generosity of Jupiter. That would be an expression of the good king. Or the evil king uses that abundance in a more miserly way, sucking in all that, with that gravity, sucking in all the energy into themselves to use for themselves. So again, was he the good and generous king, or was he the ego-inflated evil king? That's a question you can ponder. Jupiter people, relatively rare. One of their superpowers is they have strong coach energy. If you think, for example, a coach from the movies, you have like, Al Pacino as a coach of a football team or something like this, and the football team is getting destroyed in the big game, and it's like 27-3 at halftime. And then in the movies, they go back to the locker room. The team's heads are hung low. Al Pacino gives this inspiring speech. He lifts the spirits of the team, and they come back and make a miraculous comeback. The good coach or king energy, if combined with humility, has the potential of, when that person places their attention or their faith on other people, it causes them to have more faith in themselves. Positive Jupiter is the faith builder. If whatever he was saying was perceived as truth by others, they perceived him as the so-called good king, and it lifted their spirits and they felt better after listening to him speak. On the other hand, if what he was saying was perceived as false, he was perceived as more the manipulative, ego-inflated, more of a pompous blowhard seeking delusions of grandeur. That would be the extreme dark side of Jupiter. In the end, his Jupiter aura crowned him a king or a tyrant in the eyes of the beholder, either an uplifting oracle to the faithful or a deceitful despot to the doubters. Perception forged the throne or the guillotine. Now we need to move over to another massive theme in his chart, which is the Scorpio energy. Now, the sign of Scorpio is said to have two planets that rule it or have a strong affinity with that sign. Pluto, the so-called god of hell, and Mars, the god of war, both rule the sign of the Scorpion. And here we find Pluto and Mars, both the planetary rulers, in the sign. Whenever a planet is in its own sign, it is supercharged. And he has both rulers in their own sign, and we have Mercury squished between them to boot. This is a powerful signature. We could take this interpretation in a lot of different directions, but intensity is the uncontested key word here. And there was an intellectual need for him to seek truth, because that is Mercury. It is of the mind, of the intelligence, of how we speak and how we perceive reality. Here it is next to Pluto and Mars in Scorpio, seeking truth at all costs. Now, what he believed to be true, was it actually truth with a capital T, or was it greatly distorted? That's a matter of personal opinion. But his mind ferociously sought truth at all times. The shadow side of this is, of course, truth can be a very cruel thing if it's not coupled with grace and compassion. I remember a long time ago, I stumbled on this YouTube video where somebody was talking about some astrology stuff and talking about her own personal chart. And she was talking about how she was a triple Scorpio. She had her sun, moon, and ascendant all in the sign of Scorpio. It's like, wow. And one of the things she was saying in the video was, I'm a truth sayer. I'm going to trigger you. Deal with it. That was kind of her attitude. And I was thinking, yeah, you definitely are a truth sayer. That's for sure. That's one of your greatest strengths. But if that strength is leveraged with an ego inflation of, I'm going to speak fierce truths, deal with it, what that is lacking is compassion. And the truth sayer who doesn't have compassion can go through life brutalizing other people with those truths. Not everybody is wired to deal with such hard truths, nor should they. So people who are on the scorpionic path need to learn discernment about who needs to hear fierce truths and who cannot handle it. Otherwise, they can leave a lot of destruction in their wake. Charlie Kirk's soul had a goal in that lifetime: to wield that scorpionic stellium with masterful intensity, where brutal honesty becomes a laser-focused truth bomb, trying to shatter deceptions and empower transformation. However, if he stumbled with it and it was expressed without compassion, it would turn into a savage weapon, gutting allies and enemies alike in a trail of raw, irreversible damage. How did he do with it? I'll let you be the judge. This interplay and complexity between all this Libra and Scorpio energy he had in his chart made up the lion's share of his growth and evolution in that incarnation. And really, he had two sides to him. He had this Libran impulse for fairness, kindness, which again could be used in a manipulative way if it was coming from pride. On the other hand, he had this Libran desire for fairness, and it filtered through his incredibly intense mind that sought truth ferociously. So he was trying to strike a balance between paradoxical energies of kindness and truthfulness, which are both great values, but also might exist in natural tension with each other. It's within this fierce alchemy of his being, kindness and truth collided as eternal adversaries. What his soul was attempting to accomplish in this lifetime was to merge it into an ultimate power, compassionate revelation that shattered illusions without mercy. He wasn't guaranteed that outcome, but that was the core evolutionary intention in that lifetime for his soul pre-birth. Did he accomplish that? That's a matter of personal opinion. The third theme I want to talk about is he was born at a critical time in history during the Uranus-Neptune conjunction. And as you can see here, they're almost exactly conjunct. So he was really born at the apex of that time, which was around 1991 to 1995, thereabouts. That's when Uranus conjuncted Neptune. So that sub-generation, if you will. You know, Charlie Kirk, when he was in high school, everybody that was in high school with him, that group of kids is playing a critical role in the evolution of society, because Neptune represents God consciousness, essentially, or spiritual consciousness. It's known as the god of the sea, metaphor for the sea of consciousness. Uranus is the planet of quick evolution, sudden change, technological revolution and evolution that has a profound effect on collective spiritual consciousness. These are some of the themes for people born during that time. But we can also look at that specific time to see, okay, was there anything big that happened that resonates with what I'm talking about? And this is basically when the internet came about. I know the internet was invented before that, but this is when the internet became more mainstream. I remember during that time, I was, 13 years old. I got my first computer. I had a 2400 baud modem, and I remember getting my first email account. You know, I was so excited. And the internet had a profound effect on the collective, both negatively and positively, of course, but life has never been the same. The dawning of the age of Aquarius, well, it's more like the dawning of the age of the internet. If you're somewhere around 30 years old right now, or you have a son or a daughter that's around 30 years old, look to the houses of the chart and try to see where Uranus and Neptune lies in your chart, how it's interacting with the rest of the planets in your chart, to get some key insights into how you specifically can represent this so-called revolution of collective consciousness that wants to bloom within you. Now, in the case of Charlie Kirk, clearly he had a profound effect on the collective on both sides of the aisle. And for people who liked him, he was really quite effective. You know, the voter turnout among young men voting Republican really surged, and that's what he did. He went to colleges to debate and to talk. And I think that helped, Donald Trump quite a bit during the last election. Stating this more negatively, it's like, how can we get Uranus, Neptune wrong? Well, not all revolutionary ideas are good ones. Sometimes they can create great chaos and disruption in a more negative way, which would then precipitate a more net negative impact on the collective. So the question is, was he a revolutionary visionary, igniting the collective awakening, or more of a chaotic disruptor, unleashing division and societal harm? You decide. The soul has certain intentions and evolutionary goals, planned pre-birth. But once we go on this side of the veil, free will reigns supreme. We get some things right, we get some things wrong. We're not perfect, none of us are, otherwise we wouldn't be incarnating anymore. Knowing your own birth chart can be a priceless, lifelong companion, because it can give you a sense of what that ongoing, unfolding lesson plan is that spans multiple lifetimes. I hope you enjoyed this video. Leave a like or a comment below, share it with your friends, and I'll see you next time.